Men in pressed polos and shoulders broad from old wars turn toward her, some with sympathetic grins, some with the quick, hungry curiosity of a room that prefers certainty to surprise. The rec hall fluorescents buzz. Her cake still smells like canned cherries and buttercream. The shadow of a banner, "Thank you, Ray," trembles on the wall where the air conditioner hiccups. The voice repeats through the compound. Ren 7, authentication required, priority Delta Black. She does not look at the banner again. She drops the coin into her pocket and sets the little ceremonial plaque face down on a table still sticky with spilled soda. A balloon taps her shoulder. She pins it with a forearm and steps past. "Probably a test," someone says, not to her. Comms loves their theater. Ray knows better. The emergency tone is not the training tone. It is a frequency she's only heard once outside of a classroom, in a night she had hoped to leave behind with the rest of her field life. It sits in her bones like a splinter of ice. "Mercer," Calloway calls, loud, affable. Commander by tenure, not talent. "It's your day off for the rest of your life." He laughs and slaps a palm on the table. Frosting smears. She doesn't answer. Her feet already know the route to operations. They've walked it 1,000 times, half asleep and half starved and sometimes half broken. The hall smells like pine sol and hot dust. Her name tag, Ray, scratches her collarbone. She keeps her shoulders down, her breath even, and her jaw soft, because tension steals fine motor skill. And if this is real, she will need all of it. In operations, the lights are low. The screens are a wall of weather loops, traffic, drone feeds, and a blue console window blinking for credentials like a patient's pulse. 2 techs occupy swivel chairs. Blake swivels first. He's new to the night shift, 2 years out of school, and full of the swagger that comes with knowing how to reset a dozen complicated systems with a single keystroke. He barely hides his smirk. "This is a legacy call sign, probably a misroute. The database still thinks you're on the roster. Congrats on retirement, by the way." Ray steps to the console and reads the header codes, the checksum pattern, the tiny oscillations in the waveform that are not human error. Her mother taught her to hear a heart's truth with 2 fingers and a quiet room. Her father taught her to hear a lie in a floorboard. The signal is neither. It is a hand she knows knocking exactly 3 times. "Open a cold line," she says. "We'll wait for Calloway." "We'll open a cold line," Ray repeats, without raising her voice. Blake shrugs like he's being generous. The other tech, Rune, slides the fader. The room thins to the whisper hum of expensive machines breathing. The blue window stops blinking and becomes a live field, ready for the old syntax her fingers hadn't had the right to use in 18 months. Ray types the half of a phrase that would mean nothing to anyone who didn't sit next to her in a rain-soaked tent when a junior officer forgot the generator cover and the encrypted book bled into mud. She types the half her father made her memorize because he had watched too many crews die waiting for permission that never came. She types and ends with a slash. The reply lands so fast it feels like it has been waiting on the other side of her keystrokes the whole time. Ren 7, confirm readiness for directive wildfire. The word widens the room around her. She feels the rec hall balloon pop like a faint echo. Wildfire was the protocol built after the summer the river turned into a knife, after chlorine belched green over rail cars and sirens slowed to a single, sick moan. It meant chemical hazard with civilian density. It meant speed before paperwork. It meant whoever answered did not leave until the numbers stopped moving or the wind ran out of breath. Blake stops smirking. He says, "Calloway, ops." Calloway arrives with frosting on his knuckles and a face arranged for optics. He sees the word wildfire, and the careful arrangement slides, then climbs back into place like a cat that refuses to be seen slipping. "Who authorized this ping?" he asks. "The same people who wrote your comms stipend," Ray says. She keeps her tone flat, almost bored. Men who need a show don't know what to do with quiet. Calloway plants a hand on the back of Blake's chair and leans in. It's a misfire. We'll get it bounced and logged, and the speakers cut him off, polite as a scalpel. Ren 7. Operational picture upload pending. Authenticate or the pass-down will go dark. Rune looks at Ray as if he just found a snake inside a coil of cable. "This is an old patch. You sure you even remember the syntax?" Ray steps around him and sets her hands where they belong. Her fingertips rest on the worn keys the way her mother rested fingertips on a carotid artery. The pulse is there. The rhythm is clean. She exhales as she types the second half of a phrase nobody has used since the last time a refinery tried to argue with lightning. Her login lands. The wall fills with maps. Red curls over a city grid where commuter rail meets a ring of warehouses. A tanker icon blinks next to a symbol Ray wishes she didn't recognize, but does, from a temporary badge that used to let her into a building with cold floors and air that tasted like pennies all year. It means a manufacturer of disinfectants and solvents. A place that keeps chlorine in quantities that don't belong within breathing distance of neighborhoods with plastic swing sets. Wind vectors tick, sensors scribble marginalia. An incident description populates like a confession. Railcar derailment at South Line Yard. Secondary, warehouse fire, suspected solvent. Tertiary, leak indicated at Storage C. Comms degraded. Local EOC requests incident commander. Default, wildfire. Fallback, Ren 7. Fallback, Ren 7. She wasn't supposed to be a fallback to anything anymore. Retirement had been a clean handshake with a room of men who already had their eyes on the next budget cycle. She had not planned to be anyone's contingency today or for any day after this. But there are plans, and there are the hands that build them, and there are the hands that steady a door when plans fail. Calloway clears his throat. "We'll notify City Hazmat. They love a chance to roll their rigs." They're already rolling, but they're rolling into a fog they can't see through.
"You can't know that. I can read, and I can hear the consonants missing from the radio checks. Look," she taps the audio log. The responder's words are blurred with static, consonants eaten by chemicals' simple hatred of moisture. "Chlorine chews comms. We need line-of-sight signals, not wet air. We need eyes high and lungs that filter what brains need to stay useful." Blake scoffs soft. "You're retired." Ray's smile lives behind her eyes, where nobody can mistake it for an invitation. Retired doesn't mean erased. She scans the roster pinned to a corkboard in the back of her head. Who's sober? Who's quick? Who doesn't freeze when a siren starts to harmonize with itself? She does not pick the loudest. She picks the men who don't draw attention to their competence, because competence doesn't bag applause. "Rune," she says, "bring the drone bay hot. We'll need thermal and orthomosaic. Torres, Haynes, Nash, Brick." She says their names like chords she knows will hold. "Gear up for mixed environment. No excuses, no speeches, 5 minutes." The room tilts. It always tilts when she steps from observer to operator. 1 degree at a time until gravity remembers where to put its hands. Calloway raises his palms. "Absolutely not. You're not listed as operational. Liability alone." A smaller man might have begged. A larger one might have tried to fill the door with his chest. Ray's power has never lived in size. It lives in posture and in 1,000 repetitions done when nobody is looking, and in the willingness to be bored if boredom is what makes a thing reliable when you finally need it. Then keep the liability and keep up. She moves before anyone can remind her she's not supposed to move like this anymore. Down the corridor that hooks left, around the classroom where recruits watch a video of an explosion as if it is something they can learn without smelling it, past the maintenance cage where thoughtless hands left a mop to sour, into the gear room where fluorescent light makes the edges of everything bright and honest. Her locker is still hers because nobody got around to changing the code. She spins it, the number clicks. Inside lies the answer to all the times somebody looked at her and saw only angles and a kind of quiet that unnerved the talkers. She does not touch the rifle first. The rifle is a thing that makes the room listen later. First, she touches the black hard case with the little red cross that never pretends. She opens it and checks the tourniquets for dry rot with a snap between her fingers, the way her mother taught her to test a suture. She flips the lid of the chest seals, confirming the plastic still lies flat and glossy. She swaps the quick clot for a fresher packet and throws the old one into the bin with a smooth arc that lands it in the center because she practiced terrain when the splits in her hands from winter wouldn't let her squeeze a trigger without bleeding. She pulls her respirator and checks the gasket. She seats filters and closes her eyes like a child about to blow out candles. Negative pressure holds. She inhales. Positive pressure clears. The straps remember her skull. She lays out a compact drone in the open case of a retired Pelican once used to haul camera gear. The gimbal swings with sleepy precision while she rolls its firmware check without looking. She listens instead to the motor tone, because software isn't the whole story. She was born into a house where machines were treated like animals. You could tell if a machine loved its job by sound. She slides batteries, labels them in pencil because permanent markers lie about permanency. She checks the auto-injectors, atropine, pralidoxine, epinephrine, not because she plans to need them, because planning has nothing to do with wanting. And then she touches the rifle. Cased, broken, bolts wrapped in a cloth that smells faintly like gun oil and clean wool. She never named it because naming pretends an intimacy that belongs to people, but she respects it with the tenderness reserved for things that have stood between her and worse endings. She strips and cleans a part that does not need cleaning, the way a surgeon washes a hand that is not dirty. Her father used to say, "Do it again until your boredom can do it well." She smiles without meaning to, and hates herself for the small gratitude that he lives in her through a nag at the back of her wrist. By the time Torres and Haynes arrive, she is zipping the case and stowing it where it belongs, behind her, not in front of her. Torres gives her the look younger men give women who protect them without asking permission. It's not deference yet, it's curiosity that respects gravity. "You really going?" he asks. "If the broadcast I heard is real, we're already late." Nash lingers at the threshold, breathes like he hates the room for reminding him of school. Brick, aptly named, leans on the door jamb as if challenging it to remain a door. He's older than the others by a decade, scar running from brow to hairline like a stubborn river. He says nothing. He never says much until he has to, and then he says a thing once. They gear up without chatter. The old ritual snaps its familiar teeth. Plates seated, straps flattened, ankle knife tested the life. Ray clips a light to her shoulder and taps it. Dim, bright, strobe. She sets it to dim. Brighter is for the loud. The hallway back to ops feels narrower when you carry purpose. Calloway is waiting with a grin that has more teeth than sincerity. "You are not leaving this compound." "Then move the compound," Ray says, and steps around him. Blake watches her like a man who wants to keep up, but fears being exposed for not knowing how to tie all his own knots. Rune keeps his eyes on the map, like if he looks long enough, the red will blink itself away. "Say it," Ray tells Blake. "What's snagging you?" Blake swallows and says the thing like a confession. "What if it's a spoof?" "I know," Ray says. "Then we'll know before we breathe it. Real chlorine makes your tongue tingle the way a battery did when you were 9 and dumb. Spoofing can't do that." She lets them laugh because sometimes permission to laugh makes men listen better. Also, the crypto handshake referenced a line that nobody has used, since we burned the old book in a grill and stirred it into beer to make certain the dead stay dead. Spoofers don't know dead men celebrated. She points to the drone feeds. "Rune, program a grid. I want altitude above the plume, angle to see shape, thermal overlay.
If solvent fires in there, its heat signature will lie to you because it likes to hide under cooler smoke. Leave your assumptions at the door and marry your sensors to your skepticism. Rune's mouth twists. It might be a smile. It might be a grimace. Copy. Blake, I want line-of-sight relays. Comms trucks on the ridge, not in the bowl. Bounce into the city EOC on a clean channel. If his commander talks in acronyms to impress you, ask him how many tourniquets his people carry per rig and how many they'll use before they start improvising. If he answers slow, he's playing a role. If he answers fast, trust him and get out of his way. Torres snorts. It is admiration disguised as cynicism. You really are leaving, he says. Ray thumbs the edge of the plaque she still has in her pocket. Its corners bite. I was never staying. They go. The compound exits smell like rain that hasn't yet been honest. The clouds stack themselves with the carefulness of people who want to fight but aren't ready to say it out loud. The trucks are a row of mouths. Ray chooses the one that starts first, even when nobody promised it would. She chooses the one with a scuffed dashboard where some long-gone driver tapped a rhythm with a ring. She chooses the one with a first aid kit that looks touched. Brick takes the wheel without asking. Ray doesn't argue. Some hands learn control without crushing. Those are the hands that make good drivers and terrible tyrants. They roll. The road out of the compound slides into scrub and angled rocks that hold heat even when the sun quits. The city hums ahead, a sound like a power line considering a better life. Ray checks her respirator and makes herself hold the mask in her lap instead of on her face because panic tastes like plastic if you let it. The radio catches a voice jaggered with effort. EOC, this is Engine 42. We have civilians self-evacuating on foot. Visibility low. Burning eyes, coughing. We need direction. Engine 42, copy, another voice says, pretending there's such a thing as copy when fear is this thick. Staging at Fairview and 9th. The radio lurches. A howl cuts it in half. Static eats the consonants. Brick glances at Ray once, brief and back to road. He doesn't ask what she hears that he doesn't. She hears the battery taste. She hears her mother say, don't give adrenaline to chlorine, it already thinks too fast. Her father say, aim small. Ray keys her mic. Compound immediate rolling. Ren 7 assuming operations on scene. Advise when a unified command post is stood up. Until then, we are your clock. The radio answers with relief, which is a kind of respect all its own. They hit the ridge. The city opens like a map folded back on itself. The plume is not green like the pamphlets. It is a color that makes eyes water even before you tell them why. It pools low like a clever predator. It's thicker than the smoke that threads above it like a brag. The wind plays polite at the edges and cruel at the center. Rune's drones rise from their cases like insects realizing they were always meant to fly. Ray watches the feed on her tablet.
Drop a diamond if you've ever been underestimated. They nose the truck into an intersection cleared by the pure authority of hazard. Civilians move like leaks through a sieve, shirts over mouths, eyes wide, dignity intact even when snot turns ropes at their noses. Ray wants to stop for all of them. Wanting is not a plan. Engine 42 sits like a stubborn dog in the road. Two firefighters cough behind masks they donned too late. Ray is out of the truck before Brick can set the brake. She moves with that loose economy you only get after you've spent the hours to earn it. Leave the engine, she tells them, and it comes out kinder than it reads. You're trying to fight a ghost. We're not here to look brave. We're here to live long enough to do the next right thing. One of them, young, freckles trying to grow into a beard, staggers. Ray catches his shoulder and turns him so the wind kisses his back instead of his front. She puts an ampule of nebulized relief in his hand and shows him how the mask sits when you want it to help and not just make fear feel busy. She gives his partner a bottle of water and a command to pour it over the back of his own neck, not his face. He obeys because she sounds like somebody who has told men how not to die more than once. She inventories the scene with a sweep. A mom with a baby on her hip whose breath edges thin. A man with a dog who refuses to let go of the leash, as if the lead is a promise he will not break, even when his eyes are waterfalls. A kid with a skateboard who keeps looking for his brother between parked cars. The air and its lies. The wind and its restless compromise. Torres, she says, mark a clean lane with tape. Haynes, Nash, get masks on civilians who look like they'll take orders. Brick, your wheel. If anyone tries to drive into the plume, you're a polite wall. She keeps moving because stopping is a story Chlorine likes to finish for you. At the edge of her vision, a city hazmat truck appears, siren low, profile competent. A woman in a white helmet steps down with the calm of someone who knows her gear better than she knows her own reflection. Ray feels a knot in her chest loosen. Not because help has arrived. Help was already here in the hands she brought, but because someone else has the eyes. Incident command? The woman asks. Until you stand one up, Ray says. Hazmat Chief Leela Patel. Ray Mercer. She doesn't offer rank. Rank is a thing that made sense back when her paychecks did. They trade a look that says, we can talk about turf or we can talk about physics. Physics wins. Storage C? Patel asks. Leaking, Ray says. Railcar impinged, warehouse burning under a skin of cooler smoke. We can't fog that fire without pushing chlorine into neighborhoods. Fan and foam, Patel says. Fan and foam, Ray agrees, but we need fans that won't die breathing what we're breathing. Patel nods to her truck. I brought lungs. The plan stitches fast. It's ugly and it's honest, and it respects the fact that the air doesn't care about anyone's hero narrative. Fans go upwind, joints lubed with the care of people who know a seized motor is as bad as an empty plan. Foam waits at the lip, patient. Drones stitch sight lines. Ray stands where she can see everything and nothing sees her except the consequences if she is wrong. Drop a diamond if you've had to lead before you were given permission. A boy tugs the hem of her sleeve. He's 9 or 10 with eyes like secrets. Have you seen a gray hoodie? He's my brother. What's his name? Ray asks. Micah. Ray doesn't promise. Promises made under sirens break too easily. Where did you last see him? The boy points with his whole arm toward a gap between warehouse lots where wind does a trick with itself and sticks its tongue out at physics. The plume licks there, lazy. Ray files the direction in her body. Stay with Patel, she says. She's the boss with the white hat. She looks at Patel, who nods once. Ray moves. Brick makes to follow. She shakes a head without looking back. You're a wall today, she says. He grimaces like a man being told he won't get to punch. He nods anyway, because discipline isn't about liking the order. She uses the wind like a mediocre dance partner you can still count on not to step directly on your toes if you lead decisively. She checks the monitor clipped to her chest for levels and watches the numbers flirt with the line where reason gives up. She breathes shallow and steady. She thinks, my father would say slow is smooth, and my mother would say slow is kind to lungs. Behind a dumpster, a shape stands out against the wrong color of air. A gray hoodie, small. Ray's chest tightens. She whistles a note that carries, low and sweet, the sound of a kettle before it goes to scream. The boy turns. He is younger than she had wanted. He holds his skateboard like a shield. Hey, Ray says through her mask, and sounds like a robot trying to be human. She kneels so her eyes are level with his. His hands shake. She steadies them with hers, the way her mother steadied hers when she had to stitch her own shin after a fence with a grudge. He breathes. The monitor at her chest ticks up and then down like it is considering letting the numbers be friends again. "Your brother?" Ray asks. He points past the dumpster. Ray peeks where wind makes a corner into a trap. Another small shape, collapsed, hair dark with sweat. Ray moves with speed dressed as gentleness. She checks the boy's chest for rise. It's there, fast as a rabbit. She lifts him with a firefighter's cradle, small ribs light under her forearm. Back through the wind's cheap tricks. Back to where air pretends loyalty for another yard or two. She delivers the boy to Patel's crew like a promise she actually kept this time. The first boy presses his palm to the second's shoulder with an elder brother's grave authority. Ray wants to weep and instead wipes her mask with the back of her glove. "She keeps her eyes on me," she tells the first boy. "You do what the white hat says, even if it's boring." He stares past her at the trucks like they're animals in a museum come to life. "Who are you?" he asks. "Someone who didn't go home today," Ray says. She turns because the drone feed tugs her eyes. On the tablet, the warehouse heat signature fattens. The phone crews are ready, but the wind has decided to toy with the lane they need. It throws air back at them like a bully who knows the hallway is his.
"Brick," she calls. "We need to buy Patel 30 seconds of wind that doesn't lie." Brick laughs once, short, appreciative of the audacity. "You want me to go tell God how to breathe?" Ray points to the alley that runs parallel to the warehouse. It's a chute the wind likes, but is not committed to. "I want you to make a corridor. Big fans, small fans, trucks lined with hoods open, anything that moves air in a single stubborn direction. Aim it low. Push the snake where we want the head to wake up." Brick swears like a craftsman blesses his tools. He goes. Torres and Haynes become human fences with tape and gestures that make frightened people believe them. Nash, who looks like trouble until you need him, becomes a statue at an intersection no one will cross without his say-so. Patel's team hums like a hive that remembers what to do even when the queen is busy thinking 3 moves ahead. The hour stretches thin. Somewhere behind the rail yard, a horn wails long enough that a person who doesn't know better might mistake it for a train deciding to put dignity before safety. Ray knows better. It is a maintenance horn, stubborn and ancient, wired to a sensor that did not get the memo about human fatigue. Blake's voice slides into her ear. Line of sight relays standing. EOC wants to know when they can declare shelter in place. Ray almost smiles. "When we make inside safer than outside," she says. "Tell them 10 minutes if the wind lets us. Tell them if it doesn't, they owe me 10. "Tell them yourself," Blake says, awe smuggled under professionalism. They're listening. Drop a diamond if you've ever had to earn respect on the fly. The wind tries to show off, then remembers it was raised right. The makeshift corridor Brick built shoves low air where higher air can't nag it. Patel's crew lays foam like a blanket across the warehouse's cheap lie. It hisses and settles. The heat signature thins to a smolder that looks honest. The rail car's icon stops blinking like a heartbeat in a body that remembers itself after a panic attack. Ray lets herself count to 5 before she accepts the idea that the worst of the first worst is over. Then, the blue console window on her tablet flickers. The old syntax appears like a ghost who wasn't invited but brought a casserole anyway. Ren 7, authenticate for secondary tasking. Lodestar. Her throat tightens. Lodestar isn't a word the city EOC would know, or the state, or the federal branch with a penchant for branded jackets and press conferences.
Lodestar lives at the end of a corridor with a badge reader that took my middle name and held it in its teeth for 12 years. Lodestar belongs to a grid of dams and reservoirs and power switching yards that can turn a bad day into a worse week if you ask them to in the wrong way. Blake, she says, where did that tasker come from? Same pipe, same signature, same checksum. He hesitates. Same hand. Ray thinks of her father's hands, calloused by deliberate practice, nicked by the small kindnesses of a man who oiled tools as if they were pets. She thinks of her mother's hands, steady in the unbearable moments. She thinks of her own hands, long-fingered like both of them, trembling not from fear, but from the caffeine the rec hall coffee thought it deserved to impose. Read it, she says. Lodestar. Suspected Passgate event. Remote access anomalies at South Valley Switch. Patrol reports unmarked van at Service Road. Occupants in utility vests without utilities. Communications intermittent. Local law enforcement en route from 40 minutes. Request immediate interdiction to prevent manual release. Manual release. The phrase carries weight like a floorboard that always falls in the same place. Dams do not like being touched by hands that don't ask permission. Manual release at the wrong time in the wrong angle might not drown anyone, but it can starve hospital generators of the luck they need to keep breathing machines breathing. Patel sees Ray's eyes change, the way one professional sees another drive past the first destination towards the next. Go, Patel says. You gave me what I needed. Go get whoever's thinking they're smarter than physics. Ray nods once. She wants to hug Patel the way women do when they are careful with each other's armor. Instead, she taps her glove to Patel's elbow and turns. She signals the team. We're moving. South Valley Switch, utility road cut, interdiction only. No heroisms, just doors between hands and handles. Brick rolls to the truck with a grin that has the little boy mischief of a man who likes it when a plan works. What now? We stop a hand, Ray says. They roll again. The city thins into the hungry edge where infrastructure pretends it is wild to keep people from treating it like a friend. A chain-link fence gives up a corner to a padlock that has known neglect. The utility road is a ribbon of gravel that hums under tires like a tuning fork. The sky takes a deep breath it didn't have time for earlier. Rune's drone flies scout along the road. The feed shows scrub and sunburned grass and a set of fresh tracks like kneecaps under jeans, a van's tires, and the skitter of two men walking too close together not to be worried. Cut the lights, Ray says. Brick kills the beams. The dusk does them the favor of arriving early. She checks her rifle one more time, not because it needs it, but because her body feels better when it gets to reassure itself with a familiar object. She checks her respirator because chlorine likes to make cameos where it isn't invited, and because switchyards often have their own peculiar friendships with things people would rather not breathe. The road crests a low hill and drops into a notch where chain-link fence turns into a gate with a keypad. The keypad dangles from wires like a warning. The gate is open, just enough for a van and a lie. Brick eases the truck to a stop under cover of a sycamore that decided its roots were going to be a problem someday. Ray raises the binoculars. The van sits nose out in the service lot, driver door ajar like a smile gone mean. Two men in orange vests stand near the control shack, one with a clipboard, one with a coil of wire. They look like men who have seen enough movies to know how to brazen. Torres, Ray murmurs, you still carry the slingshot because you think fate likes men who remember childhood? Torres grins the way men do when they think they are about to be invited to a game. He produces a slingshot from a pocket he stitched into his vest against regulations that only ever pretended to fit him. Ray drops a small metal nut into his palm. Transformer, lower left, she says. We need a noise to make them look left while we walk right. Torres nods. He draws. He releases. The ping is delicate and precise and outrageous in its audacity. The men in vests turn like weather vanes, apologizing to a different wind. Ray and Brick and Nash cross the gravel in a low run that keeps their gear quiet. Haynes hangs back to watch the road with a patient man's contempt for surprise. Torres flanks with the slingshot like a boy guarding a king. Close now, Ray sees the wire is not for work. It is a scrap of something stolen from a spool repurposed by someone who read a forum thread about amateur sabotage. The clipboard is blank. The men's eyes are the kind that have learned to bluff at bars and never learned what happens when a bluff goes inside a place that does not negotiate. "Evening," Ray says, voice easy. "Badge check." One of the men smiles, because wolves smile too. "We're with South Valley Utility," he says. "Which division?" Ray asks, bored as late paperwork. He reaches into his vest. Ray moves first and measures herself against the training that the men behind her paid to be close to. She takes his wrist and turns it before his fingers can find the gun he didn't know she knew he carried. Nash steps into the second man the way a door closes. Brick's hands become a wall around the moment. The first man tries to argue with physics. Physics has never been good at listening. He goes to his knees. The gun skitters useless under a condenser unit. The second man takes a breath like a swimmer and then spits words like seeds. "You don't understand."
"Talk quick," Ray says. "You're about to meet a fence." The first man laughs a little too loud. "You're her," he says, as if the pronoun is a password. "Ren 7. Ray's annoyance turns into temperature. "Who told you that word?" He smiles up at her with a small chip of something triumphant in his eye. "Same person who told you where we'd be." Behind them, the control shack door opens. A third man steps out with a bundle of cables looped like intestines over an arm. He is comfortable in his body the way people who grew up around engines are. He watches Ray with the recognition of someone who has studied a file for too long. "You're late," he says. Ray tilts her head. "You're trespassing." He nods like she said something charming. "We can both be right." He lifts the cables. "I only need 60 more seconds." Torres snorts. "You only get 5. The man's smile doesn't change. "You came because a message used your old name. Did you ever ask why a system you left still knows how to find you?" Ray does not blink. He points with his chin to the low hill where their truck sits under polite shade. "Because somebody here told it to." The air tightens. Not with chlorine, with betrayal. Ray does not turn. Turning is a gift you give liars to watch you choose a new truth. She listens instead to her team's breathing. Brick, steady. Nash, quiet. Torres, a small fast rhythm like a bird's. Haynes, far but there. The man with the cables watches her with professional curiosity. "Don't worry, he doesn't work for us. He works for his own paycheck in his own mirror. He just told the wrong story at the right time." Ray inhales and tastes dust and electricity. The tablet in her vest taps with a new message, like a finger on a window. "Windsor 7, confirm visual on Lodestar target." She puts her foot on the first man's shoulder and flicks the safety on his gun with her toe. She speaks without looking away from the third man. "Torres," she says, "give me a light compromise." Torres lifts his slingshot again and fells a floodlight with a shot that makes Brick grin despite himself. The service lot slides into an honest dark. The third man adjusts calmly to the night. He does not flinch. Ray respects that, briefly, before she files it with everything else she will have to use against him if she must. 60 seconds, he repeats, as if asking for a favor instead of a felony. Ray steps forward. The gravel rasps. She feels every eye she has ever ignored on her spine. Her father used to say, "If you step through." Her mother used to say, "If you step soft." She lifts the rifle not to shoot, but to name the space between his cables and the panel he wants to touch. He watches the barrel the way good men watch storms. "Tell me who set you the name," Ray says. He smiles, and his teeth look like the honest kind. "The same place your retirement coin came from. The same place that wrote Wildfire before you were old enough to sign for it. The part of the house that never admits it leaves the lights on." Behind Ray, Brick's breath changes. Not louder,
Different. The kind of change she learned to feel 2 corridors away. She does not turn. She angles her voice low. "Brick," she says. Brick answers like a man who refuses to be implicated by the geometry of someone else's accusation. "I'm with you." The third man smiles wider. "Not him. You're too careful to choose a traitor as your driver." Ray's eyes narrow. The man lifts the cables. 40 seconds. The tablet taps her again, impatient. She says the sentence she hates saying because it makes her feel like a cliché in a uniform she no longer wears. "Don't." He shrugs, and the cable loops shift like snakes finding shade. A car door opens on the hill behind them. Not their truck, a different engine note altogether. Haynes says into the radio, very soft. "Company." Headlights crest the hill and pause, then die. 3 silhouettes slip out and down the slope with the confidence of men who believe climbing down is the same as owning the ground. Ray calculates angles and their mistakes. She can cut the third man's path to the panel with a shot that breaks his intent and maybe his wrist. She can signal Torres to blind the newcomers with a couple more righteous slings. She can let Brick be wall and Nash be door. Her tablet barks a single word that makes the skin on her forearms lift. "Windsor 7, confirm." She breathes the answer without typing. It isn't for the system, it's for herself. "No." She says, hands where I can see them, to the third man. He obliges, amused, cables lifted like an obscene bouquet. "Would you like names?" he asks. "Not yours," Ray says, and steps closer, sight settling in a triangle of clavicle and intent. "The name who told the system to use mine." He looks past her shoulder and grins with genuine delight, like a boy seeing fireworks. "Ask him yourself," he says. Footsteps whisper on gravel behind her, close enough to make the hairs at the nape of her neck notice. Ray does not turn. She quarters her stance. Brick shifts a half inch. Nash squeezes the first man's shoulder. Torres draws breath for another shot. A voice she knows says her name, the way people who practice power say the word problem. "Ray." She keeps the rifle very still. The voice behind her belongs to Calloway. Of course it does. He steps into her peripheral like a stain. He wears his command like cologne. His hands are empty, which means his pockets are full. "You're out of bounds," he says, and makes it sound like a felony to care. Ray keeps her eyes on the third man's cables. "And you opened a gate you weren't invited to." Calloway chuckles, low. "I would have sent a text if you hadn't turned your phone off after cake." "Say the word," Brick murmurs, and it isn't to Calloway. "Don't," Ray says again, but this time to Brick. She steps because her body chooses before her brain does. The sight cuts a clean little window in the dark. The third man's arm, the cable loop, the panel's steel face catching a scrap of light. 30 seconds, the third man says pleasantly. Calloway's breath is behind her ear now. "Ray," he whispers, as if using her first name makes ownership. "Let them do it. You'll want to see who comes to fix it." Her stomach goes cold. He is saying the quiet thing out loud and pretending it is strategy. He is telling her the cascade is a lure, and he wants to see what swims upstream. "Windsor 7, the tablet insists, in the politic tone of a bureaucrat pretending urgency is a virtue. "Authenticate." She ignores it and lifts her finger inside the trigger guard just enough to make a promise to physics. The third man tilts his head like he's watching a rare bird. "You're going to have to choose," he says. "If you stop me, you'll never see who opened your door for us. If you don't, you'll have to live with the weight of everything downriver." Ray thinks of her mother's hands, the way they held a shoulder while breath stuttered and then barreled. Her father's hands, the way they rested on a stalk like a prayer you didn't say out loud. She thinks of all the hands on this ground right now, visible and otherwise. She thinks of the boy's eyes under the gray hoodie, widening when air stopped trying to murder him. She makes a decision like an axe. She inhales slow so her blood remembers who's driving. She says very quietly, "Brick." Brick answers like a door locking. Ray's finger takes up slack, and then the rifle speaks. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you.
And the night answers like struck metal. The round slices the cable, not the man. Copper springs like a snake relieved of duty, and the bundle slaps the gravel with a tantrum that would have tripped a breaker if intent were electricity. He shrugs. "The house." "Which house?" "The one with the lights you were used to," he says. "The one that doesn't like to say please. The one that told me you were a patriot." "Patriotism is a hat cowards wear when they want applause," she says softly. "Try again." Brick returns with a license plate on a glove and a look that suggests the van offers a story it didn't plan to tell. "Rental," he says. "Cash. The back seat's wearing more mud than the front. 2 sets of boots. One cheap, one the kind men buy when they want to feel special on gravel. Photograph everything," Ray says. "Bag what talks." Her radio coughs once, then lifts a steady voice she recognizes and respects. Patel. "Fire and leak stable. EOC wants to declare shelter in place for the southeast quadrant for 2 hours. We can tighten if the wind behaves." "Do it," Ray says. "And put a patrol on the South Valley trunk roads. We have a van that needs a conversation." "Copy," Patel says, and adds, mild, "You sound like you stepped directly from retirement into a problem." "Some of us were born in the problem. We just got very good at finding chairs." Patel's laugh is brief and welcome. "Stay loud," she says. "Loud keeps us polite." Ray clicks off and looks at Calloway. "I want your hands where I can see them." He lifts them like a parishioner. "On what probable cause?" he asks, faux affronted. "On the probable cause that you arrived before the local sheriff's 10-minute ETA with knowledge you shouldn't have and a desire that makes my skin try to leave," she says. "On the fact that you smiled when someone almost touched a wheel that feeds a hospital. On the fact that men like you don't get their shoes dusty unless their ego needs a field trip." He smiles with all the teeth. "Then look," he says, and opens his palms toward the suspects. "You've got your narrative. Let's take the win and go home." Ray's lips flatten, not a smile. There is no going home. There is only leaving one problem so your hands are clean enough to pick up the next. She leans into the doorway and speaks to Torres without looking. "Pull the dongle. Kill its memory on the table and bag it. Pull the shack's uplink to the yard. If there's a buried fiber, find the lid and make it blind. We'll write a poem to the network later." Torres nods like a craftsman, asked to build a thing that will outlive applause. He slips the dongle into a Faraday pouch the size of a sandwich and not nearly as comforting, wipes the laptop's power, and opens a junction box with the care of a jeweler. Outside, the night breathes. Haynes murmurs, 11 o'clock is moving. Slow, testing fences. Let 'em test until they graduate. If they flunk, they meet Nash's remedial program. The tablet taps, insistent now. Beta Ren 7, authenticate. Lodestar, Node Bravo, ping lost. Fall back engaged. Ray feels an old anger, the one with long legs and good shoes, stride up her spine. Fallback engaged means someone with more clearance than Grace requested her ghost to walk through doors she left locked. It means a part of the systems she built still believes she belongs, and a part she does not trust wants to use that belonging. She steps back into the lot and lets the switchyard's hum reset her. She listens to the night for what it's not saying. The river sounds sleepy. The power lines sound pensive. The gravel sounds patient. The men at Haynes 11 o'clock sound like they think they are inventing stealth. Drop a diamond if you've ever had to pick between the right thing and the strategic thing. She kneels by the third man and sets her forearm across his shoulders so her weight reminds him where gravity keeps the books. "The house," she says. "If I ask you to draw it, would you put a flag on top?" He chuckles. "Which one?" "Wrong answer," she says, and looks at Nash. "Search their pockets for any key tags with NFC. If they brought a shortcut, I want it." Nash pat-pats like a tailor and produces 2 tags, one metal, one cheap plastic sticker with a cartoon lightning bolt printed to charmingly mock the reality it enables. Torres brings a scanner and chirps. "Cloned from a state utility badge. Poorly. The checksum is a haircut done by a distracted cousin." Ray stands, the decision already made by the part of her that does math with risk and sleeps fine later if the numbers add to saving breath. "We're handing them to patrol when it gets here," she says, "and we're following the fiber." Calloway laughs.
Going to go dig in the dirt, Mercer? I can fetch you a shovel from the optics closet. Bring a mirror, she says. You'll want to look at yourself when I find what you already know is buried. Brick shoulders the third man to his feet with care that reads like insult to someone who prefers being handled rough. Haynes calls, "Company's bored," and within the sentence, a silhouette inches too far and meets Nash's voice, soft as a funeral hymn. No farther. The silhouettes decide they have errands elsewhere. Sirens wash the hill with red and patience. Local law arrives with the dignity of people who have been called assholes for parking sideways in the name of someone else's safety. Ray keeps her rifle slung low and her hands where courtesy lives. She uses words like lockout, tagout, and attempted interference, and tampering with critical infrastructure. She tells the truth without adjectives. The sergeant's eyes, tired and aware, flick to Calloway with a question that chooses not to be spoken. We'll take them, and we'll take statements that won't leak to whoever's bored at the coffee machine. Your wife still works nights at the trauma center? Ray asks without condescension. He nods, surprised then unsurprised. She does. Then you know why the wheel stays kissed by cable tonight. He swallows a reply, nods once more, and gestures the suspects into the back of a cruiser with a flat palm. Calloway clicks his tongue. Such community theater, he says. I hope the reviews are kind. Only audience I care about is sleeping in a pediatric ward downriver. Let's go dig. They find the fiber lid where the lot's edge meets scrub, a concrete platter pretending to be gravel. Torres and Brick pry it like gentlemen and lift it without complaint from the metal. Inside, cables lay like arteries bundled and labeled in a language of numbers. Torres's flashlight walks the bundles and stops where someone taped a pigtailed greediness onto a trunk. He whistles. They didn't splice, he says, impressed despite himself. They kissed the sheath with an inductive coupler and listened like gossips. Cut it, Ray says, politely. Torres uses a fiber shear with a blade sharp as a rumor. He isolates the pigtail and gives it a haircut it won't recover from. The coupler dies with the melodrama of a starlet who refuses to be shot from the left. The tablet sighs. Lodestar, Node Bravo isolated. Node Charlie querying. Ray stares at the word querying until it starts to look like a threat misspelled. They're walking the grid, she says. Whoever's at the other end doesn't care if they set fires so long as the smoke writes their initials. Calloway rocks on his heels. Good, he says. Let them write. Words can be evidence. Ray turns on him with a tiredness more dangerous than anger. You want them to trip a gate so you can triangulate who cares. And you brought me here because you knew I'd be faster than the official ladder. Are we at the part where you explain the favor I owe you, or at the part where you ask me to sit down so men with jackets can talk on camera?
He spreads his hands again, priest of a church that worships aftermath. Neither, he says. We're at the part where I ask you to let me use your call sign one more time. She laughs. It sounds like a thing breaking that always needed to be broken. No. He leans in. Think bigger. I think kinder, she says. Bigger wishes it were that brave. Brick's radio crackles with Blake's voice, damped by the Ridge relays but still fast. Ops to Ren 7. We have an anomaly at Ridgewater Dam substation. Security cams went to snow. Maintenance logs show a manual override request from a defunct credential. Guess whose call sign was in the comment field? Ray shuts her eyes once, quick. On our way, she says. She looks at the sergeant and points to the wheel. This stays as we did it until a dayman with a code and a conscience signs it back into service. The sergeant nods, solemn. You going to Ridgewire? He asks. We're going to the place men go when they think gravity will write them a pass, Ray says. They roll. Gravel turns to old asphalt that remembers better budgets. The sycamores along the river lean like gossipers who promised not to tell and then wrote it down anyway. The night decides to be honest and lets cold in around wrists. Inside the truck, Brick drives like a good father, steady, decisive, only as fast as a child can sleep safely.
Torres taps code into a tablet until his curses turn into a soft hum of satisfaction. He's isolating access lists that will matter later. Nash rides shotgun, scanning the dark for the kind of reflection eyes give off when they want to live more than they want to hide. Ray cleans the rifle she just fired, not because residue will cost her a shot, but because repetition tells her blood which direction to face. She wipes the bolt face with a patch that used to be a t-shirt, and the smell of solvent threads memories she does not give permission to. Her father's shop radio, always 2 stations off. Her mother's hands under tap water, rinsing certainty from a night that had too much of everything. The radio murmurs with the kind of quiet competence that proves they trained somebody well. Patrol sets screens. Patel's crews demobilize pieces that don't need to stay. The EOC voice says something about a press advisory with the hushed hope that nobody sharp will ask why a retired call sign took a lead. Ridgewater's perimeter fence rises, ugly and honest. The gate's keypad is intact. That's either mercy or theater. Brick noses the truck into shadow and kills the engine. The river keeps up its sleepy pretense a little too hard. Ray clips her mask to her belt because switchyards own weird air. She shoulders the rifle, utility instead of threat. Rules, she says, no one touches a wheel unless I say. We don't shoot unless physics laughs first. We move like we've read the manual, not like we want to sign it. They split without dramatics. Haynes takes the high catwalk with knees that know how. Nash ghosts the lower fence line. Torres hugs the control building's west wall and finds the service hatch, not because signage helps, but because people never put hatches where cameras love them. Brick angles to the east gate, where trucks enter at noon and leave at 2, and nobody thinks about the human shape of routine. Ray and Brick reach the control building's main door together. The card reader glows the tired green of a worker who stayed past shift. Ray lifts her own decommissioned badge. It doesn't just fail, it sulks. She smiles and lifts a magnet that definitely was purchased at a hardware store and definitely was used for everything but refrigerator art. The reader glitches. The lock clicks for half a heartbeat. Brick slips a shim in with a magician's wrist. The door considers dignity and then surrenders. Inside, the air has that smell electrical rooms get. Warm dust, old ozone, the hint of burnt sugar that isn't. Panels line the walls like patient librarians. The SCADA station sits with its chair pushed back. The monitors face black in a way that asks for forgiveness in advance. Torres's voice comes soft. Service hatch bypassed. No tamper switch. Whoever came here knew how to be rude politely. Cameras? Ray asks. Snow, Torres says, not cut. Loop masked with noise. Whoever did it didn't want the feed dead. They wanted it to seem sick. Ray sits at the SCADA terminal and does not touch the keyboard. She watches the power LED blink a signature she recognizes, not asleep, not awake, thinking too much. She unplugs the network. She waits. She plugs it back in. The blink rate steadies, then flirts, then pretends normal. Someone's tickling it from upstream, she says. Calloway drifts in, hands in pockets, curiosity arranged on his face like a lapel pin. You know, this looks very much like the kind of night a person writes a book about. Only books I like are manuals and children's stories, because they're humble. Children's stories because they remember what fear tastes like and still choose kindness. He laughs, delighted and offended. You make even insults sound like job training. She ignores him and flips the terminal to maintenance mode with a keystroke she is not supposed to remember. A prompt asks for a credential that would take a badge and a finger and a retina if the building still loved her. It doesn't. She goes around the fence instead of through the gate and checks the rack room for the out-of-band console someone left as a kindness 5 years ago and forgot. It's there, hiding under a note that says "Do not remove" in a handwriting that makes scared men confess. She plugs in, breathes, and types a line that makes the switchyard answer in plain. Logs pour like confession. She scrolls with 2 knuckles, old habit. There, a login from a service account nobody should have used since the old contractor took his retirement to a lake. The account did not guess, it knew. It came in, asked for a handshake with a key derivation named after a bird her father used to whistle. It failed. It tried again with a salt that mentions a date she would have rather forgotten. "Someone fed it my history," she said softly. Calloway stops humming. "What?" "They salted the key with my first commendation date," she said. "A joke, a dare, a way to see if nostalgia is a credential." Brick's jaw flexes. "Do you want me to break something?" he asks. "Not yet," she says. "Breaking is for when we run out of building blocks." The logs stutter. A new line appears, not past, present. "Manual command Q, open gate 3, pending physical interlock." Ray stands so fast the chair kerfunk backward. "They found a way to stack it," she says. "They can't push the gate without someone on site releasing the interlock." "Which is why you were invited," Calloway says, to please. Ray rounds on him. "They want my finger on a wheel so they can write my name under consequence," she says. "They want Ren 7 to be the story." "Your call sign is very marketable, even now," he says. She wants to hit him harder than she wants to succeed. That's how she knows she needs to put her hands on work instead. "Haynes," she says. "Door alarms." "Silent," Haynes says. "But there's a padlock on gate 3 that wasn't there in my memory." Nash adds, "Tire tracks to the service path. Footsteps. 3 sets. One drags a little, like a knee that resents stairs." Ray heads for the sublevel where the manual interlocks live. Big levers that look like museum pieces and still decide economies by being stubborn. Brick follows because he knows the heft of a lever is more honest than the weight of a decision. The corridor down smells of forgotten water. Pipes clink softly, their own conversation. They pass the first interlock, sealed and tagged decades ago, painted over enough times to call itself art. The second sits with a chain through it, hung with a brand new lock and a tag that says "out of service" in a font that has never been outside. Ray kneels. The lock is real. The chain is real. The tag is theater. She pulls a tiny mirror from her pouch and angles it to the back of the lever. There, a reed switch, magnet taped, poised to tell the console a human stood here and blessed the sin. She laughs without humor. "They wanted our hands on it, not because we're needed, but because we're convenient." Brick's mouth is a straight line that breaks rocks. "What do you need?"
Torres appears like an idea. Breath measured. Kit already in hands. "Bought this with my own money because procurement thinks joy is illegal," he says, and holds up a proper magnetic reed. "We make our own honesty." They set it. The magnet kisses the reed. The console upstairs will think the lever is exactly where the manual said it should be. Ray photographs the arrangement like a wedding. Brick tightens the chain and sets the lock, so it grins at anyone who thinks bolt cutters mean anything when physics says no. The tablet pings, nearly petulant now. "Ren 7, authenticate. Lodestar, confirm operator presence at gate 3. She bares her teeth at the screen. "I'm everywhere and nowhere," she says, and taps a command into the out-of-band console to spoof a keep alive that looks like a satisfied supervisor. The cue flips. "Open gate 3, failed, interlock not verified." Somewhere, a man swears in a room she can almost smell. "Drop a diamond if you've ever had to outweight someone's ego." Calloway's phone vibrates hard enough to dance in his pocket. He doesn't look. He looks at Ray instead, like a biologist who just found a species he doesn't deserve. "He'll escalate," he says, voice gone teacherly. "They countered your soft hands. They'll borrow sharper ones." "Then we put gloves on physics," she says. "Brick, stay with the interlock. If somebody tries to argue, show them the chain's sense of humor. Nash with me on the surface. Haynes, keep the catwalk. Torres, baby the console like it groomed your cat." They move. The building attends to them, panels chatting behind their backs. Outside, the night has traded one kind of quiet for another, the kind that knows mouths are about to work. Headlights rake the gate and stop. A utility truck this time. Real logo, real plates, real men in real hard hats who left their caution at home. Ray's skin prickles. This is the escalation. Not amateurs in orange vests, but professionals rented by the hour to do a task they weren't given the ethics for. The driver steps out and clocks the chain on the gate, the tag, the polite lie. He looks at the control building and sees nothing because Ray arranged it so the building looks like a mood,
not a person. "Evening," he calls because scripts need to hear themselves. "We got a work order." "Me too," she says. "It says keep your hands in your pockets until daylight." He laughs, like men do when they're testing the depth of the pool with a toe. "I got a number says I can make an exception. Your number can stand in line, behind the kids in PQ." He rolls his jaw. He's not stupid. He's not smart, either. He's a man who thinks his vest is a shield against consequence. "Lady," he says. "Don't," Brick calls from below without raising his voice. The driver looks down, surprised at the calm and abasement. The passenger steps out, less curious, more carved. He scans the fence line like he was once taught to clear rooms and then taught to forget what that does to sleep. His gaze snags on Haynes' catwalk for a second too long. Haynes becomes even more of a shadow. The passenger's eyes come back empty. "We can do this the ugly way or the paperwork way. I like paperwork. It does not bleed." The passenger smiles without any good news in it. "Open the gate, or we'll open it for you." Nash's stance changes a degree, a spelling error most men miss. The driver sees it and forgets it all in one blink. "Last chance," Ray says. "Turn around, call your dispatcher, ask why the job order mentions my call sign." That lands. The passenger's smile loses a tooth. "You got friends," he says. "I have lungs and a memory. Both are worse than friend when you make the wrong story." The driver reaches for the chain like a dare. Ray gives him a small gift. "Think about your hands," she says. "Do you prefer them the size they are?" He lets go. He turns, he mutters to the passenger, they retreat to the cab. The truck idles like it wants to apologize to the gravel. Then it backs, slow, and leaves, faster than it came. "Company retreat canceled," Haynes says. Ray releases a breath. She'll pretend later she never held. "Brick, status." "Interlock is faithful," he says. "Torres," she says. "Q keeps knocking, fails every time. Whoever's remote is now opening dictionary to stubborn." The tablet vibrates against her vest like a trapped moth. She pulls it. The message is different now. Not the polite bureaucratic text. A single raw line across a black field. "Ren 7 stand down. Your team is compromised." Her mouth goes dry. The next line arrives before she can hate the first properly. "Authenticate or Brick dies." She doesn't look down the stairwell. She doesn't give the message the gift of her eyes. She hears Brick's breath, steady. She hears Haynes shift his rifle, metal touching metal in a way that loves silence. She hears Nash's small cough he uses when he needs to remind his own body to be kind to itself. She types, not into the system, but into the part of her brain that refuses blackmail generations deep. "No." A third line scrolls. "Look up." She refuses. Then she does because refusal is not strategy when physics is in the room. She lifts her head. On the ridge beyond the fence, a red dot flowers, then two. Not on them, on the chain. Snipers, or someone borrowing the costume. The dots wobble like men who learned the dot isn't how you aim, it's how you make someone else swallow. "Teams," Ray says, calm enough to make her mouth taste like iron. "We have lasers on the chain. Nobody moves. We let the dots finish their little dance. Torres, if the console cues again, make it someone else's problem for 10 seconds. Torres hums that small hum. "I can make it think it's in a different time zone. Clocks are liars if you tell them bedtime stories." The dots stutter, then die. A muffled voice from the ridge. "We can sit here all night." Another voice, closer, left of the first. "Or we can make you do paperwork for a funeral." Ray's anger crystallizes into something shard sharp and useful. "You first," she calls back and gestures low to Haynes. He lifts up a hand mirror the size of a wallet and tilts it so the ridge sees itself. Silence. Then, like a scratched record, "Cute." "Cute is for toddlers," Ray replied. "This is adult supervision." Her tablet flashes again, but this time there's a sting in the tail. A system window elbows the thread aside and writes in its own small, ruthless font, "Manual release authorized. Gate 3. Operator Ren 7."
For a heartbeat, everything inside her goes as still as a photograph. Then heat climbs her back like an old enemy. She did not touch a wheel. She did not touch a panel. She did not say yes. The cue shows green. Somewhere, hydraulics begin to breathe a different way. The river's voice changes timber by a hair. Nash breathes, no, like a prayer. Ray looks at the console, at Torres, at Brick below, at the reed switch they set like a promise. She looks at Calloway, who is, finally, not smiling. Someone pushed my name through a door I didn't open. Brick's voice from the sublevel, steady, undesperate. The lever's cold. Ray's eyes track the hydraulic indicator on the wall, the old mechanical kind that betrays itself with a trembling needle. It trembles. She swallows, tastes metal, and says the only thing left in a voice that can hold a room together when the room wants to come apart. Hold. Nobody breaks, nobody breathes a story that helps them. The river's timber deepens another hair, impossible to a civilian and plain to a woman who learned to listen to water because her mother used it to clean blood and her father used it to quiet rifles. Ray runs. She bolts down the stair, Brick already moving to meet her. The inner lock is chained, honest. The reed is still married to its magnet like a couple who decided fidelity is cheaper than therapy. The wheel is where it was, cable singing with the same note she pulled from it. Upstairs, Torres shouts, "Console says open, sensors say no. There's a split." Calloway, of all people, whispers, "They found an echo in the manual chain."